Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, SOCE, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Science in Counselling and Family Therapy, MSCCFT, Second Year, MCFT, 006 Applied Social Psychology, Block-1 Socio-Cultural Influences, Unit 1 Culture and Socialization, 1.1 Introduction. Think about your favorite festival or the last family occasion you attended. Most often, these occasions are engagements, marriages, births. In the family, housewarming ceremonies, where we get together as a family, perform rituals together and have fun. What do these occasions signify? They represent a common understanding of customs and beliefs shared by social groups. Besides the most observable celebrations and customs related to special occasion, there are some mundane everyday practices that we follow in our daily life. Some of these practices are bathing before praying, praying at specific times of the day, touching the feet of elders in the family, feeding the cow, sharing a family meal, fasting, taking care of elderly parents, and many more. Have you ever thought about why we follow these practices? This is because we are members of particular social groups. These social groups are categorizations formed on the basis of the region we belong to, the languages we speak, the religion we follow, and the castes we are born into. Every practice and custom conveys values, mores and mentalities that should be continued for survival of the social group as well as to maintain societal harmony in general. These practices and beliefs are derived from ancient traditions and include gender norms and rules related to marriage, caste endogamy, for example, as well. Belongingness to groups of our origin becomes an important marker of our social identity, and group members have a tendency to protect and enhance their collective identity. How do we do this? We propagate the rituals, customs and everyday practices followed by our social groups by passing them on to the next generation. Transgressions or breaking of rules, not following the socially endorsed norms, are viewed negatively and discouraged by most members of the group, especially those who are older and or more powerful. This process, by which you become an effective member of your social group, is broadly referred to as socialization within a cultural context. There are many cultures and social groups across the globe which live in diverse ecological and environmental conditions. Depending on a variety of factors, including their socio-historic tradition, each group prioritizes some values, some behaviors and some practices over others. This leads to immense cultural and ethnic diversity in the world. For example, in some parts of the world women veil themselves, whereas in other parts they don't. In some warrior tribes, learning to be aggressive is an essential part of growing up, while in other groups like the Buddhists, believing in non-violence and controlling aggression is the norm. This indicates that the socio-cultural practices and cultural goals and values underlying these influence our development as human beings. This unit will cover significant aspects related to socio-cultural influences on our development. Objectives. After studying this unit, you will be able to explain basic concepts related to culture and socialization, describe theoretical perspectives explaining the influences of culture and socialization on development, discuss cultural variations in child-rearing practices across infancy, early childhood, middle childhood and adolescence, and understand the unique features of socialization, including gender socialization. In the Indian context. 1.2 Culture and Socialization Basic Concepts. The unit begins with an explanation about the concepts of culture and socialization and defines them. This is followed by an overview of different theoretical perspectives that provide a framework to understand culture and socialization. The main frameworks included in the unit are ecological, systems theory, developmental niche, and developmental contextual framework. The last section describes variations in socio-cultural practices from birth through adolescence and the impact this has on the developing person. Apart from this, the ecological contextual features which influence development will also be discussed. The unit concludes with a summing up of major concepts. Let us begin with what is the concept of culture and how is socialization as a process connected with it. For centuries, a debate has ensued about how human beings are different from other species. When Charles Darwin purported the idea of evolution as accumulated change over generations, it was met with immense speculation. Research thereafter focused on the evolutionary links to our behavior and development. Frequent comparisons were made between human genetic makeup and that of other species to find similarities and differences. We share up to 98% of our genetic makeup with chimpanzees. However, there is still a great difference between apes and humans. What contributes to this difference? This missing link holds something which is characteristic of our species. Many scientists think this missing link is culture. Culture thus becomes the man-made part of the environment, which is created and changed by human beings. It includes language, beliefs, morals, art, laws, customs, and everything else that makes us members of human society and particular social groups within it. Cole 2001 define culture as the designs for living that are based on accumulated knowledge of a people, encoded in their language and embodied in the physical artifacts, beliefs, values, customs and activities that have been passed down from one generation to the other. pp. 36. It is a complete whole, a package, which includes many aspects of our everyday living and even thinking. We acquire culture, though it is not a concrete entity. It is ever present and influences our mind and our development in innumerable ways. Many psychologists believe that culture is also transferred from one generation to the other, much like the process of transfer of genetic materials. This means, in spite of cultural diversity, there are some common strands of development or developmental pathways will still be evident. These are the universal aspects of human development. This means, although specific cultural practices, child-rearing methods may vary, every culture has some common understanding of children's growth and development. In every culture, adults take care of children to ensure their survival and development. As children grow older, their assimilation into the larger cultural group also becomes the responsibility of adults around the child. How does this happen? This happens through a process called socialization. Socialization is a process through which children acquire the knowledge, values, and standards of a culture to become effective, functioning members of their society. Socialization begins from the time the child is born and includes every interaction the child has with others in her but his family and society. For example, through socialization children learn the ways of being in family and community. This includes their age-appropriate daily schedules, when to wake up, when to sleep, when to eat, how to eat, gender-appropriate dressing, how to behave with others, and much more. Socialization is a deliberate process. This means adults around the child deliberately introduce and monitor children to their cultural systems in order to pass on cultural knowledge from one generation to the other. However, children do not passively absorb everything that parents and elders tell them. They also question and debate because they have their own personal goals. We must understand that human beings are capable of introspection, that is, we reflect on our behavior and that of others and display intentionality. This means we have clear goals and intentions about what we want. We also understand or come to understand what others want from us. This constant process of reflexivity and intentionality makes us unique beings. We reflect our thoughts and motives to others through language and other complex behaviors. Thus, socialization as a process is not one-way or unidirectional from adults to children. Rather, it is a dynamic, bidirectional interaction between the parents, adults, and children. This means knowledge about the world is co-constructed by adults and children. Socialization is thus a process which inherently also includes conflict, as goals of adults and children may not always be in agreement. This is how cultures change from within. Many practices become redundant with time and are hence discontinued. Contrarily, cultures are also very resilient to change because socialization practices are rigid, deliberate, and slow to change. Many ancient rituals and practices are still followed, even if just symbolically, and this demonstrates cultural continuity. So what do we conclude after reading the above? Cultures are dynamic, cultures change due to internal and external factors. But cultural change is very slow and not always concretely observable. But cumulatively, over a period of time, the changes are far more evident. For example, our dressing styles have changed a lot in the last 30 से 40 years. Most urban women now wear a variety of clothes from saris to salwar kameezes to trousers and skirts. Men too do not wear traditional clothes now unless the occasion demands. This change did not come about overnight, suddenly, but was very gradual. The demands of the context play a crucial role for cultural change to occur. Many times, observable changes do not always signify changes in our thinking. We may wear many modern or Western clothes, but our thinking about certain issues like intercaste, marriage, or gender equality, for example, may still remain conservative and orthodox in nature. So change in overt practices may be faster than change in our cultural mentalities. To explain this further, studies on acculturation show that immigrants from Asian countries consciously try to conserve cultural traits, habits, and practices from their home culture even if they are living in another post-industrial culture of the Western world, USA, UK, Canada. They try to mingle with the popular culture of the host country yet are very serious about preserving their own traditional practices and beliefs. Socialization is a deliberate, conscious process. Socialization is a deliberate process of co-constructing cultural knowledge about the world around us. Parents and other adults around the child consciously monitor, guide, and teach the child behaviors appropriate to their own cultural context. This means socialization holds the key to cultural transfer. Parents and adults regulate their socializing behaviors so that their children comfortably fit in with the rest in society. Parental goals, wishes, and aspirations for their children mediate this process. Many Asian parents are known to use demanding parenting styles with their children because they want their children to perform well in academics and extracurricular activities, much in keeping with what is culturally expected. At the same time, concerns for family honor and prestige in society are intertwined with the child's behavior and performance, not just in school but in other spheres of social interaction also. Parenting styles, a prominent feature of child socialization, develop on the basis of cultural norms for socializing children, parental goals as well as personality traits of parents. In many cultures, parents are not the only socializing agents for the child. Other kin, relatives, teachers, and sometimes even neighbors play the role of important socializing agents for the child. This is especially true of the Indian child growing up in close-knit extended or joint families. This brings us to the next section on theoretical frameworks to understand the influence of culture on development. Many theorists have given detailed models and frameworks using which we can understand various child outcomes which are a result of specific socialization practices in different cultural contexts. These models are useful for a within-culture understanding of how socialization and child development takes place, as well as for comparison of the same across different cultures. For example, using any of the models given in the next section, you can understand how Indian parents socialize their children, with what goals and using what child-rearing practices. At the same time, you can use the model to compare Indian and American parenting beta socialization practices, or that of any other culture, if you have observed and have data from both cultures. These models or frameworks have emerged from extensive research and also lead to more research in the thriving field of cultural and cross-cultural psychology. 1.3 Theoretical approaches to understand culture and socialization. There is no single broad theoretical perspective that unifies the entire body of relevant scientific knowledge on human development. Instead, human development is understood and approached from several theoretical perspectives. These perspectives can be grouped into 4 frameworks that answer the central questions of development. All the perspectives talk about the relative role of nature or biology, genes, DNA, trait transfer, and nurture, or environment, psychosocial environment, nutrition, contextual factors, and their influence on development. The biological maturation framework gives prominence to biology and explains development as endogenous, or from within the individual organism. The environmental learning framework considers development as a product of exogenous factors outside the individual in the environments, and thus gives more importance to learning and factors that affect learning like reinforcement, rewards and training. The constructivist framework gives equal importance to the person and the environment and states that both play equal and reciprocal role in development. The 4th framework, which is of relevance to this unit, is called the culture context framework. Let us understand it in detail. In the IGNOU 5.0s, anthropologists John and Beatrice Whiting began a study on differences in family practices and child development across the world. This study was popularly known as the 6 Cultures Study, as it was conducted in 6 communities from India, Mexico, Philippines, Japan, USA, and Kenya. The chosen societies differed in social complexity, dominant economic activities, cultural belief systems, and domestic living arrangements. In every culture, child behavior was viewed as an index of the child's personality, while adult behavior, beliefs, and values were indices of adult personality. These were measured systematically across 6 cultures. This study brought forth different child-rearing practices, demystified many popularly held notions about children. After the study, it was realized that ecology, economics, social political organizations set the parameters of behavior of the agents of the child-rearing mothers. In most cases, psychologists realized that theoretical concepts stemming from the industrialized Western world could not be universalized so easily. Child-rearing practices were thus regarded as arising out of and designed to carry forward the culture of adults. With more cross-cultural research, the significance of cultural influences on child development became established and the culture contextual framework developed. Psychologists who work within the cultural context framework agree that biological and experiential factors have reciprocal roles to play in development, and like the constructivists, believe that children construct their own development through active engagement with the world. But they differ from the other theorists by asserting a third force, culture, as part of the mixture. According to the cultural context view, nature and nurture do not interact directly. Rather, they interact indirectly through the powerful and ever-present force of culture. The cultural context framework considers both children and their caretakers to be active agents in the process of development. Thus, from the culture context perspective, human development is an outcome of a process of co-constructing beliefs and ideas about the cultural world. Importantly, it does not look for stage-like consistency in abilities and behavior which most other theories and perspectives in developmental psychology do, like Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Rather, the framework anticipates wide variability in individual performance as the person moves from one kind of activity to another due to the cultural and historical circumstances in which the child is situated. Thus, the culture context framework is open to the idea of even non-existence of particular stages of development. The framework offers new insights into understanding the interactions between culture and development, which move beyond the confines of only nature and nurture. The acceptance of this framework in mainstream developmental psychology has led to more cross-cultural sensitivity and culture-inclusive advances in the field. The next frameworks also emanate largely from an understanding that cultures and contexts shape development through socialization processes. Now let us take a closer look at the other frameworks' perspectives. 1.3.1 Ecological Systems Theory. The importance of viewing behavior within its social setting was first recognized by sociologists who stressed the importance of individuals' subjective view. One of the most important contributions to these ideas of individual in a society is the ecological systems approach by Yuri Bronfenbrenner, 1979. The ecological framework allows us to understand the connection between culture and development. The ecology of human development as defined by Bronfenbrenner sees an individual not as a passive and static entity on which the environment exerts great influence, but as a dynamic and evolving being that interacts with, and thereby restructures, the many environments with which it comes into contact. These interactions between individual and environment are viewed as bidirectional and reciprocal. For example, while a child's development is being influenced by parents, family, school, and peers, the child is also influencing and molding the behavior of others. The ecology of the child is represented in the form of concentric circles, each fitting into the other depending to its influence on the developing child. You have read this theory in Block-1 of Course 8. Here we will highlight the salience once again. The microsystem represents the interaction between the child and her immediate environment, e.g. family, school, and resulting behavior such as dependence, independence and cooperation and competition. The individuals in the microsystem engage in face-to-face interactions, e.g. in child's home, at church, temple, mosque, gurudwara, school, hospital, daycare. Mesosystem, the second level, comprises linkages between two or more settings containing the developing person. This is a system made up two or more microsystems, for e.g. home and school, daycare and school, family and peer group. It is the mesosystem that links or ties together information, knowledge and attitudes from one setting that help shape behavior order in another setting. For instance, if parents emphasize the importance of learning at home and the preschool teacher provides stimulating activities at school, then it motivates a child to learn more. Exosystem, the third layer, influences the child's development in a significant way, even if the child is not a part of it. Parents' place of work or the community health center and welfare institutions like hospitals are considered part of the exosystem. For example, the child is not an active participant in the parent's workplace, but policies in the workplace like restrictions on leave and long, inflexible working hours for parents may influence the child's development negatively. Similarly, if the workplace accommodates allowances for childcare or creche facilities or paternity leave, the exosystem can positively influence the child's development. The fourth and the outermost layer, macrosystem, is the most complex ecological system. It encompasses the other systems and consists of customs and values important for child's culture. The larger political, economic, administrative, social system formulates the macrosystem. The entire societal structure is part of the macrosystem, which holds within itself other systems and influences them. An example of the macrosystem could be the legal system in a culture, which incorporates and responds to the cultural fabric of that society. With reference to India, our legal systems include provisions for different religious groups like the Hindu Marriage Act or the Muslim law. These are in response to a secular society which believes in equality before law in spite of religious diversity. Similarly, welfare provisions for child care are in accordance with ideal perceptions about family life and the role of women in society. An important feature of the ecological systems is the time factor. In a revised version of the theory, Bronfenbrenner added another system, the chronosystem, which accounted for the time factor or temporality of development. He believed that the study of development in context is incomplete if it does not include observations at two or more different points of time in the lifespan. While the ecological framework explains contextual influences on development, the question may arise: how does this happen, and how can we better understand the specific processes that take place? The developmental niche provides a framework for understanding how various aspects of culture guide the process of development. By using this framework, it is possible to see how the cultural environments of particular children are organized, to see how the culture is presented to the child at any particular time. 1 March 2002 The developmental niche. The term niche is borrowed from biological ecology, where it is used to describe the combination of features of the environment a particular animal or a species inhabits. This is explained by using the example of a pigeon and a robin, both of which might live in the same part of a forest. But the birds create a distinct niche for themselves based on exactly where they build their nests and from what materials and the kind of food they seek. This shows that although the larger environment is shared, its experience for each differs considerably. Theorists Charles Super and Sarah Harkness gave the developmental niche framework. According to them, at the center of the developmental niche is a particular child of a certain age and sex with certain temperamental and psychological dispositions. By virtue of these and other characteristics, this child will inhabit a different cultural world than the worlds inhabited by the other members of his/her family. This world will change as the child grows and changes. There are three major components or aspects of a culture that constitute the developmental niche and shape development. The first component is the physical and social setting of everyday life. It includes the size of the family, the living space, area of residence, number of siblings in the family, size of the family, type of occupation of the family, and other features. For example, in rural Kenya, mothers often have 8 or more children, making family size very large. As the income-generating activities of these Kenyan mothers are home-based, the baby is likely to have several playmates and caretakers who are siblings. By contrast, in the southern part of Holland, many people live in a small geographic area where houses are very compact and the living room serves as the children's playroom. Typically, if there is a baby in the house, there will be a play pen in the house where he or she can play independently with toys in close proximity to other members of the family. Eating and sleeping schedules are important aspects of the physical and social setting. For example, in many North American and European homes there are 3 meals a day at specified timers versus the 5 to 6 small meals at unscheduled times customary in many Asian cultures. The second component of the developmental niche focuses on culturally regulated customs and child-rearing practices. Many aspects of the children's environment are organized by customary practices. The use of older siblings as caretakers in rural Kenya, for example, is customary. There are special terms for these child nurses in the native Kenyan language, and they are expected to care for their younger siblings in a special way that is different from mother's care. Likewise, the use of playpens in Holland is customary. It is commonly accepted as a solution for the problem of keeping the baby safe and happy in their living environment. Sleeping and feeding arrangements for infants also tend to follow customary patterns. For example, in rural Kenya, although the next to youngest child continues to sleep with its mother and the other siblings after the birth of the younger child, it no longer sleeps at the mother's front but rather at her back. This change, along with termination of breastfeeding and back carrying, results in a fundamental shift in the child's physical and social setting of life. Customs of care are a source of support for parents and other caretakers because they provide ready-made solutions to issues of developing children, from how to protect children from hazards in the environment to how to ensure that they are adequately educated for their future roles in society. The third component of the developmental niche is the psychology of the caretakers. Parents' cultural belief systems and related emotions underlie the customs of child-rearing and validate the organization of physical and social settings of life for children. In cultures where babies and young children customarily sleep close to their parents, for example, parents often feel that to put the child elsewhere amounts to neglect. On the contrary, among the American middle-class families where babies are often put to bed in their own separate rooms, practices geared to teaching the baby to sleep through the night and quiet itself upon waking are understood as part of training the child to be independent, a culturally important attribute throughout life. Within the niche, these three components influence each other. Parents do not easily leave their children in settings which they judge to be dangerous.
The customs of childcare are generally adapted to the particular physical and social settings, as well as to what are symbolically acceptable to the caregiver. The various aspects of the larger human ecology differentially influence the three components of the niche. The customs carry a particular weight of history and are a conservative force such that, other things being equal, many parents will rear their children with many of the same traditions they grew up with. Economic and demographic changes may rapidly affect the settings of daily life for children. In an urban environment, with an increase in dual earner families, children may spend their day with fewer brothers and sisters, or probably in a daycare center. The psychology of the caretaker may be directly influenced by shifting ideals at the national or community level about the nature of children and their needs. That is, the changes in the larger society can influence the child through the components of the niche. 1 June 2003 Developmental Contextual View. The most recent view explaining socio-cultural influences is the developmental contextual view given by Richard Lerner. Lerner gives a model of developmental contextualism in which two concepts are important. Goodness of it means the right match between the child's innate biological attributes and the social environment, including the relationship with parents. So if there is a good fit between the child's attributes, abilities and parental expectations, the child will thrive and there will be positive developmental outcomes. On the other hand, a poor fit will lead to more conflicts and discord between the child and others, resulting into negative developmental outcomes. To assess the goodness of fit, all the important systems in the context where the child participates are taken into account. These include the family, school, the neighborhood, and other contexts. Another important concept is that of plasticity, the ever-present malleability of the individual. This means we are constantly open to change and innately ready to adapt to newer situations. The influence of the socio-cultural context and external factors test the limits of our plasticity. Plasticity also indicates that early and effective interventions can change the developmental pathway for better, and that it is never too late. Processes of adaptation to challenges in the environment are used to understand plasticity in individuals. Lerner has used this framework mainly to understand positive youth development in a variety of contexts. Based on the understanding of these theoretical frameworks, when we study human development and understand childhood as a developmental stage, we must focus on 1. Local contexts and cultural meanings that organize the lives of parents and children in particular settings. For example, the lives of children and their parents living in villages of India are organized around farming, taking care of animals, and doing household chores. In the village context, caste boundaries are very important. Children may grow up in large, extended or joint families, and family relationships are very close-knit. The same is not true of children growing up in middle-class families of urban India. The child lives in a smaller family, the houses are well built, modern but smaller, and there are fewer family members living under one roof. Similarly, because a child grows up in a nuclear family, caregiving is mostly the parents' responsibility. If the parents are both employed, one may need to employ others to take care of children. In both conditions, development needs to be understood with reference to the cultural context and meanings children and parents associate with specific relationships, objects, and events around them. Though social relationships in which children survive, develop, and learn. Children who grow up in large, extended families may be cared for by many people of the household. They may thus form close relationships not just with their parents but also with other family members like aunts, uncles, and grandparents. In case of a child brought up only by parents, they are the child's only source of attachment and security. If the child is spending a good amount of time at the day care or with the professional child care provider, the relationships she will form with that person will also become significant. Teen. Everyday activities of children that promote physical development, language, and learning. Children who go to schools participate in many school activities and then spend time at home on either school related activities like doing homework or playing with friends. Many children will also be involved in doing structured extracurricular activities or pursue hobbies like going to learn painting or singing. The everyday activities of children who drop out of school or those who have never gone to school are very different, like working in the house, taking care of younger siblings, earning or helping out the parents in the farms, or other occupations. For these children, playing and working are thus a merged activity which happens simultaneously and not separately. By involvement in such activities, these children learn other skills and competencies like taking care of younger children, cooking, cleaning, or pottery, carpentry, and the like. Char. Outcomes of health, competence, and culture specific ideals of behavior. Children who are breastfed for longer durations without supplementary nutrition show poor health by the time they are in preschool. Children who are immunized and well fed show better health prospects. The ideals or expectations of appropriate behaviors from children also emerge out of the local context and culture in which a child grows up. A child who has grown up in a joint family or an interdependent community will have a clearer understanding of authority and cooperation. Similarly, children from urban families are expected to be more independent and alert because parents may not be constantly present with them. Similarly, there could be larger cultural expectations, like maintaining harmony or openly showing aggression, which could be encouraged or discouraged across different communities. Panch. Interaction of the environment with children's developing capacity to produce outcomes, normal or otherwise. Clean, open spaces and encouraging psychological environments in the home interact with the child's growing need to run or jump and feel secure. This child will be able to explore the opportunities around his to enhance physical development. On the other hand, children living in overcrowded and unhygienic or highly polluted areas may not have these advantages. Similarly, if the child's home environment is very stressful or the parents, too dense are not very encouraging, the child may have lesser opportunities to enhance his overall development. Let us now turn our attention to variations in child rearing practices across the world by way of specific examples and understand its impact on development. 1.4 Cultural variations in socialization and child rearing practices. Social practices common in our own culture make us assume that they are the only way things can possibly be done. But comparisons across cultures make us aware of variations in social practices across the globe. Most research about children and their development took place in the developed nations of Europe, North America, Canada, and other Western countries. All theories of child but human development were also developed in these places and were true for people residing in these areas. Until recently, no one paid much attention to huge number of children who were born and growing up in underdeveloped or developing areas of the world, like Asia and Africa. In comparison to the development of children in the Western, more developed regions of the world, we know very little about the development of children in the developing, also poorer areas of the world. The conditions in which children grow up in Europe or North America are very different from the conditions in which children grow up in rural Africa or Asia. This shapes their development differently. Some of these stark differences are: look at the screen. Now let us focus on some cultural variations occurring during the course of childhood in children from different parts of the world. The information given below is a result of many years of research that has taken place in these societies. The practices of childcare vary from culture to culture, and the developmental outcomes are also different. This section presents select examples to bring forth variations in child rearing practices. 1 April 2001 feeding, sleeping, weaning and attachment, sleeping patterns, neonatal period. By 15 days of birth, the combined sleep of American babies is an average of 8.5 hours. Most of these babies show marked shifts in sleeping in the first week of life. The adaptation or adjustment to day and night sleep is natural to people living in urban, industrialized world. Some differences in this adjustment can be attributed to culture. Let us examine some differences in this adjustment in various cultures. Kipsigis of Kenya, Africa. In rural Kenya, babies are almost all the time on the mother's body, tied and carried to work. During the daytime, the babies will sleep when they can while the mother carries out her routine tasks like farming, household chores, or social activities. During the night, they sleep near the mother's body and are breastfed when they wake up. On an average, the overall daytime sleep reported by rural Kenyan mothers for their 1-month babies was only 3 hours at a stretch. Many smaller naps or periods of sleep were distributed across the day. With the passage of time, Kenyan babies adapt to longer sleeping hours at night. Thus, adaptation to longer sleeping hours at night for Kenyan babies happens much later in life than American or other babies of the urban, industrialized world. The influence of these early experiences can be seen in adult life of Kenyans as well. Kenyan adults are more flexible with their sleeping and awake hours than Americans. Breastfeeding. Although babies across the world are nursed, there are many variations in the way nursing behaviors are organized. The activity of nursing or breastfeeding is organized around the sucking reflexes of the child and the way in which parents respond to these behaviors and the social interaction that begins. These initial sucking reflexes later turn into organized feeding. Some cultures put the babies to the mother's breast soon after birth. Alternately, others will bottle feed till the mother's milk starts flowing. Babies are also given to wet nurses who have better milk flow than the mother till the mother's milk starts flowing. The way in which nursing is handled will have a direct effect on the child's early experiences and indirectly influence later experiences also. Let us see how this happens. If the baby is bottle fed until the mother's milk flows, he has adjusted his sucking reflexes to bottle feeds. This will interfere with subsequent breastfeeding when the mother is ready. If the baby cannot adjust to breast feeding after bottle feeding, breastfeeding may be given up altogether. This outcome will change the kind of milk that the child gets, mother's milk versus other milk from other sources, as well as the social interactions that will take place between the child and the mother, body contact, talking to baby while feeding, eye contact and child bata mother's involvement in the activity. Similarly, if the mother believes that milk from other sources are more nutritious than her own milk, she may herself decide to give the child bottle feeds, but by being with the child. This will then not have a differential impact on the social relationships between the mother and the child. Weaning. It is found that the process of weaning, which means removal from breast and use of liquid or semi-solid diet for infants, starts very early in some cultures. Within India, the class differences are also responsible for these differences. For example, in the middle and higher class, weaning starts at about 4 months, while in the lower class it is observed that infants are breastfed as late as 1 year. In cases where weaning is early, it is accompanied by appropriate complementary feeding. However, in many rural areas, the child faces the threat of malnutrition because breastfeeding continues for a longer period of time, while complementary nutrition does not begin. This has a huge impact on the growing child's health. 1 April 2002 Aggression, schooling and apprenticeship in middle childhood. Aggression, the form and extent to which aggression is exhibited depends on many factors including gender and culture. Researchers generally show boys in most cultures exhibit more aggression than girls, reflecting sex role socialization and cultural rules regarding expression of aggressive behaviors. Cross-cultural differences in the amount of aggressive behaviors would be observed depending on the societal acceptance of aggression. For example, the Semai of Central Malaya raise their children to be non-violent and do not use physical punishment. With this kind of socialization, children seldom witness aggressive behavior and have no aggressive behavior to imitate. On the other hand, the Yanomamo of the Amazon region of Brazil and Venezuela are often described in anthropological literature as the most fierce and violent people in the world. In Yanomamo society, aggressiveness is the major determinant of status within the group, and learning the aggressive ways of the society begins at an early age. In Indian society, for example, many warrior caste groups like the Rajputs value bravery and valor, and socialize children accordingly. Schooling versus apprenticeship. Until the late 20th century, last 100 years or so, majority of children across the world did not attend school. They were involved in economic tasks and domestic activities in their homes. Many were involved in infant or sibling care and played in multiple age children's groups. Even after Western-styled schooling was introduced in many countries, these patterns have not completely disappeared. It was believed that children who do not go to schools or drop out early lag behind in many cognitive competencies and do not reach the highest stage of cognitive functioning, formal operations. However, research on everyday cognition with non-school children shows these children display immense social competence and can perform complicated cognitive tasks in their real-world contexts. The same children, however, could not perform well on textbookish and abstract problems which were far removed from their everyday context. These differences were attributed to a great extent on the learning styles of schooled and non-schooled children. Non-school children typically learn through apprenticeship or hands-on training from a more skilled adult, mostly a parent, elder sibling, or adult relative. They learn by doing and are given more complex tasks when they master the previous, simpler levels. School-based learning, as we all know, is abstract, theoretical, and hardly ever experiential. Thus, both systems enhance different cognitive and social abilities in children. To hold anyone as a norm would be erroneous. 1 April 2003 Puberty and marriage. Puberty. Cultural variations are observed in the way the onset of puberty is received. For example, in South India, the onset of puberty is celebrated through ceremonies or distribution of sweets in order to announce that the girl is now ready for marriage and reproduction. On the other hand, in Western countries, such celebrations are not considered as markers of reproductive age and marriage. Marriage takes many forms in cultures around the world. For example, one would find societies where polygamy, one man is married to more than one woman, is practiced in contrast to the usual pattern of monogamy in which one man is married to one woman. After these examples, let us briefly look at the features of socialization in the Indian context. Socialization in the Indian context is segregated by gender differences with different modes of socialization used for girls and boys. 1.5 features of Indian socialization. The features of socialization in the contemporary Indian context are slightly different from the focus of socialization practiced in the traditional times. This is because India has undergone tremendous social and economic changes in the last decade or so due to the combined forces of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Indian society is hence at the flux of tradition and modernity. This leads to many micro-level changes which show their presence in family socialization practices. Let us look at some of the changes from traditional times to the contemporary times. In traditional times, birth of a boy was celebrated with much pomp and show, whereas that of the girl was not welcome. Beliefs about girls being temporary guests in their parents' home were reinforced right from the time of her birth. With age, the girl is gradually initiated into taking up responsibilities for household chores, taking care of the younger siblings, and looking after the needs of the family members. More often than not, concerns for her safety and protection of her chastity restrict her mobility and reduce her chances of going to school for an education. As she grows into a young girl and reaches puberty, she is ready for marriage. Generally following the caste system, the girl would not be married in the same village. So after marriage the girl moves to a village far from her parents' village. She may be able to visit her parents' residence once in a year just for few days. Post-marriage, although she may feel lonely in the beginning, her goal becomes to assimilate with her new family, for which she has been trained and socialized since the early years. The birth of children, especially boys, brings a new status for her within the family now that she has provided them with a male heir. As she gains authority in the household with her increasing responsibility, her status in the family improves. Finally, as her son grows older and she becomes the mother-in-law, she enjoys complete power in the family in terms of decisions related to the daily household functioning. The case of boys was slightly different. They enjoyed higher status right from the time of birth as the male heir in the family. During the early years, the boys spent lot of time among other women folk of the family and enjoyed the undivided attention from the mother. The mother-son bond is very important in the Indian context as much of the mother's social status is derived from her ability to produce sons. In the school years, the boys moved out of the protected household domain and disciplining them became the responsibility of the father and other male relatives. Under the father's harsh tutelage and strict discipline, the boy was expected to perform and prepare himself for the roles of the family leader and provider in future. In the traditional Indian family, adherence to the family norms, conformity to the family ties or kinship ties, and considering the interest of the family and its members first was of utmost importance. Against this gendered backdrop of traditional socialization, let us take a look at the changes that have occurred in contemporary times, leading to some changes in socialization processes. With increasing emphasis on girls' education, some gender roles have changed, but larger gender stereotypes remain strong in society. With education, employment of girls in the organized sector has also increased, especially in the urban areas. Thus, girls now train for a variety of future roles, including the traditional roles, which are not changing as rapidly as the other factors. Now there are less restrictions on the mobility of girls, leading to more exposure to opportunities for progress in society. With reference to marriage, although it still remains a coveted goal of adult life, the age of marriage has increased for both boys and girls, giving them more time to explore their identities. There is more freedom and accommodation of personal choice in the partner selection process now than ever before. Preparation for dealing with newer societal challenges has led to changes in the strategies of socialization for girls and boys in the Indian context. 1.6 Summary. In this unit, you have come across many examples that open your eyes to cultural variations in the human experience. These have been explained from the point of view of socialization for cultural continuity and their combined influence on the developing person. Contemporary frameworks to understand, research and theory related to socio-cultural influences have also been discussed. Just like you are a product, producer and representative of your culture, it is important for you to understand other individuals as products of their own cultures and thus avoid an ethnocentric bias. My culture is the best. This approach will take you a step closer to appreciate cultural diversity in an objective manner and not judge others' behaviors against the norms of your own culture. This approach will also help you further in research and designing culture-sensitive applications but are interventions based on theoretical concepts to a variety contexts. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates and we will see you with the next chapter.